I'd like to call to order the Board of Education meeting. It's September 4th, 2019. This is a special meeting at 7 p.m. Let's all stand for our pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 2, we have presentation. We have our bond refinance. So are we all ready? Wow. Okay, let's go.
I figured it would bring the A-team, so I thought John would come along and make me look pretty good for this. So we appreciate the opportunity this evening to address a situation unique to the market where very rarely do we see a transaction having been financed under new money and 1 year later an opportunity to refinance it. But as Mr. Doze and I were just speaking momentarily, the markets have had a precipitous plunge in terms of interest rates, all due to a variety of different economic factors going on across the world, especially here in the United States. And what this has offered is an opportunity where taxable interest rates come so low, they start to almost mirror tax-exempt rates. You have one sheet in front of you that kind of explains what's going on, the phenomenon in the market, which I'm certain you've heard in the news, the inverted yield curve. The inverted yield curve plus the overall environment of the market where interest rates are so low creates a perfect storm scenario whereby we can refinance this debt because we were able to do so with such a short call on the first piece of debt we did last year. That 5-year call really came in to help. It was something that Jeff and I worked on tremendously. He was adamant about maintaining it. And just sort of this opportunity. I'm not going to say we foretold this opportunity coming, but we were prepared to take advantage of it because of it, and now we are. The 10-year Treasury rate's at 1.47%, and the other unique thing is that in the immediate short end, out 2 to 3 years, those rates are higher than the curve as it goes out. That's why it's inverted. We are going to depend on those interest rates and those investment rates when we invest the money in an escrow, which would be in existence until the call date of the prior bonds out to 2023. It's called a net funded escrow. And what we do is establish an amount that we can put in that fund for it to grow over the next 4 years. And at the call date, once that fund has grown, commensurate to all the principal outstanding that we want to call, we then call that principal in. We are doing this on a taxable rate, and I'm going to let Mr. Larson explain that.
Two things. First, the escrow not only is there to fund the call at the call date, but to cover all of the interest and principal payable in the meantime too. So it's a laddered investment that throws off what you need to take care of the outstanding bonds. As a part of the Tax Reform Act, a year and a half ago, I guess, Congress did away with the authority of public bodies to advance refund their tax-exempt obligations on a tax-exempt obligation, with tax-exempt obligations. And so you can't do this tax-exempt, you have to do it with taxable paper. As a result, because and advance refunding is a financing that closes more than 90 days before the date on which the prior obligations will be retired. And so obviously we can't retire these until 2023.
23, correct.
December of 2023. So we have an advance refunding, but it's with taxable securities, and we're fine in doing it.
On the one sheet that does have some graphs on it in the lower left area, you can see the indicative yield curve and how it is inverted, where actual short-term rates are slightly higher and then dip down as maturities go on further, which is a unique phenomenon. It's an indicator generally of a recession, which a lot of economists say is on the forefront here in the United States. There's a lot of different factors going on. Again, just speaking to Mr. Dozen about this momentarily before we started. Political factors, mostly economic factors, but regardless of the situation, we do believe these rates are going to be here for a short window. This opportunity, I believe, has a finite shelf life on it. It's something that I think we would want to move on, not aggressively or in haste, but certainly something that you'd want to take advantage of in the immediate future.
What impact does it have on the timelines that we adhere to for the spending of the bond? So, we have to spend a certain amount, a percentage of the bond within a certain period of time. Does this refinance reset that clock and then therefore extend that time that we have to spend those bond funds? And the second question I have, if we can't pay something off till 2023, that's past that deadline of when we have to have those bond proceeds spent. So how does refinancing impact those timelines?
But the timelines do not apply to refinancing.
What do you mean by that? So we're still held to the point that we have to spend 80% of it, okay.
And have to expend it is too strong a word. Words that it's a reasonable expectation going in that counts. Unfortunately, they will look at it in the rearview mirror and when the time comes. But if there are reasons why there has been a delay, we have a very good argument that you're not going to be at first. Spend it as fast as you can.
Well, we're delaying.
We're trying to spend as fast as we can, but
Well, and you may or may not have heard, but we're delaying our construction, by 6 months. So, the timeline is pushed out a little bit further than we originally planned. But we haven't gotten any specifics on what the drawdown schedule is supposed to be when we're, I'm assuming we're still well within range of being able to build and draw down necessary bond funds.
yeah, it's within 3 years, so yes, we're still within that time frame. It might just be, we may have to adjust the draw schedule to draw down a larger chunk than what was originally anticipated, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
How much do you think this will, and I realize it's very much an estimate at this point, but what do you think the financial benefit will be?
I'll speak to that.
If you turn to page 11 of the packet in front of you with the numbers. This is a current market snapshot representation of the old debt versus what the new refinanced debt would look like. So right now, and keeping in mind, the original numbers I had sent around had a little bit of a higher savings module under the actual savings column. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that overlap that we constructed around the original financing to make certain we are not double assessing for the old bonds until those are done, and then the assessment comes in on the new bonds. So we'll keep that all intact, and that was very important. So one edit to the numbers you have now in front of you is a slight deferral of principal in those first few years pushed back. But overall, the gross cash flow savings under the column headed savings is around $11 million. You'd have to bring that back to today's dollars, a present value discount, and we're doing that at the arbitrage yield, which is just about mirrors the tick on the transaction. And in today's dollars, that's over $7 million. It's significant. What you do, go ahead, John.
No, I'm sorry. I focus also on the number on page 2 that shows the percentage of savings on the refunded bonds, 16.57%. The Government Finance Officers Association guideline is start thinking about it at 3%.
So even given that we are so well above that general rule of thumb at 3% net present value savings, it gives us a large margin for error even if rates start to move against us during the process of preparation. will be well within the guidelines to refinance this issue and save a significant amount of money. This has only happened once before in my career, and that was just when we did Revere Schools together, Mr. Larson and I, where it was the implementation of the tax rules that had a significant effect on the fixed income markets, and we saw an opportunity right there. Back then, we could still do tax exempt refinancing, so at the end of 2017, there was a flood of refinancings hitting the market before the calendar year was out. This one unique being that it is taxable. One thing Mr. Dozen had asked in his email earlier today was the implementation of a particular security structure in here called premium capital appreciation bonds. And I just want to bring that to quick attention that if you go to page 3, you'll see them at the bottom of the page labeled all the way to the left column, CAB bond. And you see a pretty significant interest rate under the rate column, one that I know John is terribly fond of. So this is the stated yield. This is not an error, nor is this a rare circumstance to use these. When we are in a higher interest rate environment, just about every school district, because we are par restricted in the state of Ohio for voted general obligation debt, meaning if you voted for $10 million, you cannot issue more than $10 million, but naturally there are expenses associated with the transaction that need to be paid for. So we generate a premium to pay for those expenses. That's what these particular securities are doing. They're also being utilized to bridge an inefficiency in the escrow. That escrow that Mr. Larson had referred to earlier, where we net fund it. But you need to start that net funding at a basement level, because you only have now 4 years to grow it. So if we cannot generate enough money through the regular issuance, whatever is left over that we have to build to get to that basement is generated through the premium on these securities. And that's why there are so many. A couple of different things that'll be established in this transaction that'll be different than the original transactions, that most of these bonds will be sold close to par, or they'll be PCABs. We do have some slight premium bonds in the serial structure earlier. This is not very common in the taxable world. Taxable investors are very savvy. They're generally corporate investors. They don't like premiums, they don't like discounts, they buy things at par. It means the interest rate and the yield to the investor are equal. But I did work with Austin at Stiefel, because otherwise, if we didn't generate some additional premium in the earlier portion of the curve, we would have had to have established too many PCABs. And PCABs are non-callable. So when you've issued them, you must pay them through maturity. There is no refinancing on those. So we wanted to retain a certain level of prepayment flexibility even on this issue, because there's very large likelihood that a lot of these bonds, before they mature, will be refinanced again. John, do you want to comment real quickly on the difference with when we can refinance these tax exempt versus taxable again? Or I should say tax exempt.
Bring them.
Back to a tax exempt status if ever that situation would arise.
I think you're able to do it. I think that the old ones have to be gone.
Completely gone.
Completely gone. I don't look for that to happen.
Okay.
Does this require a new rating? Do we have to go back and do another presentation at Moody's and do all that?
Yeah, could you explain the process? You're gonna call these, right, and then we're gonna reissue, is that correct?
That is
And then,
correct.
are we gonna do the same process where we offer, people in this community, and like she said, are we redoing this again, with the Moody's?
On the Moody's, we'll more than likely do a call on this one, because we'll try to save as much of the expense as possible, because that goes right into savings. But I'll let Mr. Larson comment on the production of the POS, because that's the major effort that needs to go forward.
Really, the process is the same. We will prepare an offering document, an official statement. And the difference is we'll make crystal clear that the interest is taxable, not tax exempt.
Okay.
I think in terms of marketing process, you can do it exactly the way you did it before. But absolutely you have to have a rating.
Yes.
But I also would expect that to be an easier process. I mean, it's so fresh.
Right. But we'll have an initial offering where we allow, okay,
Yeah, we'll have the same retail hotline set up where
okay,
citizens can purchase some of these. We'll give them retail preference through the marketing portion. Their orders come in first in line, absolutely. With a taxable transaction, you may not see as much interest. This starts to kind of defeat the purpose of why a lot of them would look into it in the first place, especially anyone in a fixed income bracket or an older age bracket. So, however, some of the younger, more savvy investors may like to see that 4% yield in the early part of the curve is very attractive on the coupon, or on the rate itself. So it could be a mixed interest or appetite for local investors, but we will certainly produce that opportunity. Absolutely, that'll be first and foremost.
did we have a lot of interest remember when Jeff and you presented, did a lot of people come? I can't remember.
We had a significant retail order for the last bonds.
Should we redo that again?
Absolutely.
Or you just, okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Will that impact the timeline, and do we run a risk of not having such a great interest rate if we go through that full process again?
That'll all be done contemporaneously with everything in the background. It shouldn't delay anything at all. We can have a similar investor meeting if you wish to discuss this with the public, the same way we did on the last transaction. We can also give them, outside of this outstanding opportunity to save money, one thing I've always put forth to all my refinancing clients is this is a significant PR opportunity for the board.
Of course.
This isn't $500,000, this is $11 million. You're talking over 25% of the original issuance. The bond guys have given you an opportunity, and
Sure.
you're there to take advantage of it. So it's huge, and we can present material that shows the effect on the millage rates and everything else.
Okay. So we need we have to see what direction we want to go.
So let me ask, and just see if I can kind of recap the mechanics of how this works, kind of where we started, where we're at, and how this will work, just to kind of make sure we're all grounded. So when we sold initially the original offering, it ended up in 3 buckets of bonds: serial, term, and cab.
Original issue did not have any
It
caps.
didn't have any cab,
Because-
so it's just, okay, so cab is new for the refinance.
We did have, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Tiny amount.
Okay, I'm sorry, we did have a
Right,
cap.
I plugged that logo.
I'm so sorry.
So that, the small piece of the original bond issuance that was capped, those are not callable, so those are staying put. Are all the rest of the bonds callable?
Yes, sir.
No,
Outside of the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
5 years are non-callable.
first 5 years are not callable, so they'll stay. Okay?
Okay.
So anything that matures after December 1, 2023 is going to be called.
Right.
Okay,
Oh,
so we sold bonds, serial bonds, term bonds, a little bit of cab, and they were laddered out across a different time frame. And anything that was laddered within the first 5 years is not callable. We have to see it through to maturity.
Correct.
And the cab, small piece, is not callable.
Correct.
Correct.
Everything else lands in the callable opportunity, and that is callable in 5 years in 2023.
That is correct.
So what we're talking about doing is taking that amount. Do we know what that amount is?
Just gonna ask that question.
So the call, there is a summary of
Just,
bonds are funded in this packet, and it is on page 15. $43.96 million of callable principal.
Okay, so almost the whole thing
Yes.
is callable. So we're gonna look at, about 44 million, and in this refinancing, we're gonna go back out and sell new bonds at a lower interest rate, and we're gonna take that money and park it in some type of an investment
That's correct, yeah.
Correct.
escrow account, which is gonna yield hopefully some growth, so that in 2023, we will then be able to call in 43 plus million of bonds that were in the original issuance
Correct.
and pay them off. and will be refinanced at lower rate.
Summed it up. I'm gonna start bringing you to my other meetings. Yep.
Yeah, it's good that way.
You got it all taken care of. That's exactly the way it goes. The original issue had high coupons. And just as, because I'm certain you're going to get some people, well, I understand, did you sell it at such a large interest rate to begin with? One of the things we had to do, though, remember, because of that overlap promise, that we were not going to double assess, is that we deferred principal for a couple of years, and we built up excess original issue premium, John's favorite term. And that amount was built up so that it was, you basically are paying interest on interest, but you borrowed it up front, put it aside. That amount of money, which I put in the email, $6.7 million, I believe, is being utilized for the first 3 years of this issue to pay interest.
Right.
So that money's going to stay put. John and I are going to do further analysis on that money because now it is obvious that it is overfunded. Because right off the bat, in the next few years, not only are we have that, we're going to be saving an additional several $1 million.
Right.
So that's why those coupons had to be a little higher on the original issue, because we needed to generate that premium, that excess premium.
Right.
So that's why this opportunity is unique.
Right, and so just to, to kind of recap that, because although there's not a lot of people at our meeting, we do record and some people watch it online. So when you talk about double assess, just to, remind everybody, we've got the high school bond, which is coming due. And when we went out for this bond issue, we basically staggered it, structured it so that it would be staggered, so that everybody's taxes would relatively remain the same. And you wouldn't be paying two bonds
Right.
at the same time. And so that double assessment and some of that extra float in there was meant to be able to bridge that gap.
Exactly.
And retire the high school bonds and then let these new bonds kick in.
Exactly.
And have the current property owners paying exactly what they've been paying for debt service.
Right.
Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect that you may be able to reduce the size of the refunding because you'll be able to devote some of the premium that's in the bond retirement fund to that purpose.
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
that's another way of saving.
That'll help the inefficiency in that escrow tremendously. That will amplify the savings. It'll definitely enhance them.
Right. And just so everybody's clear, this is a huge savings to our taxpayers. But it does not generate any additional funding for our building project, our pre-K to 5 building project. But what it does do is over the life of the bonds, it will reduce basically the interest paid by about $11 million, which means over time, our taxpayers should see a little bit of a downtick in their property taxes relative to this bond, because we're going to refinance and basically reduce our debt obligation.
Exactly. That total required assessed levy number will reduce commensurate to the additional cash flow savings established by this new issue, and that'll also be reduced by growth in the taxable value of the district's properties as well, which
Does that mean then that the 2.2 mils that we got to pass the bond is going to be reduced?
The effective millage should
The effective
tick-
millage.
should
Yes.
draw
It
down a
should
little.
be a little bit.
it won't be dramatic, but it will be reduced.
So when asked the question, because this will be the question we ask if we talk about refinancing, so what were the bonds, what was the interest rate on the original versus what the refinancing, just in layman's terms, so we can say, if somebody says, well, what is the difference? Well, we paid 4% on these, but now we're gonna pay 2%,
Yes.
or what are those percentages? I know you probably have it in here, I just.
I believe I actually put that in.
4.45% down to 3.25%.
There you Beautiful. I'm glad
That was in my question.
I'm glad you
Oh, was it?
remember.
The average,
Yeah, it was-
the average on, because of, the bundle of bonds types and durations, maturities, the average was about, he had sent back in the email was about 4.45%, and the refinancing is about 3.25%.
Right.
So you're really coming down over a percentage point,
Yeah.
potentially,
Yeah.
if all goes
In general, in
Financing.
most
Sorry.
refinancings,
Sorry.
that spread is 25, 30, maybe 50 basis points. Here we're talking 120 basis points. So that's why this has such substantial savings. It's just a really unique situation. Again, just as for comparison, say Brunswick schools went out the same time you did last. We're already in the process of refinancing their issue, almost to the penny the size of yours, taxable. Highland Schools in Medina, even bigger, 52 million, went out last year. We just initiated proceedings with them to do a taxable refinancing as well. So there is a slew of these coming through in the what we call the forward calendar in the municipal bond market. So, and we may very well examine, before we get Mr. Larson to establish the parameters on legislation, a combination of maybe even thinking about leaving some of these outstanding tax exempt instead of putting all our eggs in the refi basket. We'll give you that cash flow cost benefit analysis. Right now, I think the needle points directly toward you have a very unique situation. You refinance what's callable.
And sales are just as, I mean, we sold our bonds fairly quickly the last time. So how have sales been on refinance specifically with these schools?
Oh, this stuff is going to fly in the market. Corporate buyers, taxable investors love municipal debt because the rating agencies hold municipalities to such a much higher standard to their ratings levels. If you're a corporate investor and you see a single or double A rated taxable piece of paper, they will jump all over this because in their world, that's pretty much gold. So, good question.
Speaking of that, are we gonna have a goal with the rating to improve it, or are we just gonna try to maintain what we came out last
I
time?
don't see an opportunity to improve upon the rating solely because of your debt burden,
Yeah.
but no problem affirming it, maintaining it, none whatsoever. Would you agree with that, Jim?
Anything you say, Michael?
Okay, so we need to give direction?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, yeah.
You have our direction?
Yeah. Okay, so we need to work on the messaging, we need to work on the PR component, we need to get something set up in our calendar,
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
To communicate this to the public.
And anything you need from me, investor meetings, documentation, agendas, calendars, anything you want to put on the website, if you want me to fashion some language for further edits, by all means, just let me know. Whomever wants to request that, be fully available. I will work with Mr. Larson tonight to get a starting point where he believes he can get out that first draft of the POS, the preliminary official statement. That'll get things rolling.
What's your projected timeline?
Things are good right now, but then that means it's going to take a little bit. I would say we should be able to get a draft out in the next couple of weeks for sure.
So let's say if we put ourselves in late September with an initial draft, it should be in pretty decent shape.
Yeah, it should be in really good shape.
We have another board meeting September 24th. It's a Tuesday.
I don't think we're going to have legislation for the 24th. Whenever your next meeting is, we'll be ready.
Yeah.
When do you see us actually going to market?
Right.
So late,
Probably
late October.
mid to late October. Yeah, probably late October.
So when is our October
It's
meeting?
not good. So it's that Tuesday of that month too. So is it the 24th maybe of October?
Whatever the last Tuesday is.
28th, something
I
like
mean,
that,
if-
so it'd be the 22nd.
If
22nd,
we're already
you're right,
gonna be
22nd.
presenting this to the public in a separate meeting anyway, we could probably call a quickie meeting to get together rather than have to wait until we have a scheduled board meeting.
I agree.
If all we really wanna do is approve this, cause I would agree, I'd rather get us in the market
know,
as
right?
soon as we can get in the market.
There's too many variables that are out there right
Yeah,
now.
you know.
That would be greatly appreciated. We don't tend to like to call special meetings, but in this circumstance, a late October meeting may butt us up, possibly delay us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and
Yeah, we
October's a
don't-
good active economic month.
Yes.
We can get in October.
Yeah.
They'll be going by Halloween.
Projections are this rate environment's going to definitely stick around. We fully anticipate the 25 basis point cut in the overnight rate, That went from a probability of 60% to essentially 100%. Now talk is starting to needle over to potentially 50 basis point overnights. Now the 25 basis point cut in the overnight rate is pretty much priced into the levels that you'll see here. If for whatever reason a 50 basis point or another 25 comes down, that would definitely spur a pretty good run on rates, I would think. That would be unexpected. We could see a possible dip. But as far as a maintenance of these levels, as much as we can project on that topic, we definitely see a decent window of opportunity here with the levels where they're at.
So we can communicate this without having the legislation, is that correct? No problem. So we could put this before maybe our September 24th board meeting, or is that too late?
We could probably announce it at that meeting, I would think might be a good thing to
But
do.
like to have,
And
remember
then-
how I think that's what we did last time, where we kind of put it with a board meeting, like an informational meeting?
We
Do you
did, and
remember?
I think we set a date then that they could contact or whatever that date was. So I think if
Right.
we announced it at the September meeting and then actually had a date in mind, like, mid-October, to say this is, the time they could, I don't know.
The question is, by the September meeting, will this be at a place where you would feel comfortable in inviting people who are
Right.
interested in investing to come and talk about it, or is it too preliminary in September?
September 24th. I mean, as far as an actual establishment, I don't see why not. It would definitely be a much more preliminary level in terms of sizing and everything, but I mean, yes, we could easily answer questions about the opportunity to invest, much in the same fashion we did last time. I would have no
Well,
problem.
here's the question, what could go wrong if we did that? Would that,
I don't think anything could go wrong. I just want to make certain we would be entirely clear with the public that it's estimated. This is right now what we're working at. If rates escape from us,
Right.
then there's just no transaction.
Okay.
There's no detriment. There's no penalty or anything
Right.
legally, I wouldn't think. So,
But the last time we did this, we were a little further down the path. Where
Right.
we could say, here's what you do if you're interested in investing.
Right.
And so it was really kind of a solidified offering, and
Right.
we could, so we can message this out ahead of time that this is what we're pursuing, but in
Right.
terms
Exactly.
of meeting with people to say, potential investors, if you want to.
you don't want to rush it?
Right.
I think
Because
that's right.
right.
regardless of the fact of you saying there's risk and things can change, that's not what
Right.
ends up happening.
Yeah, if we're further down the road and we know the pricing is imminent, then
Okay.
we speak more on a factual basis, and I think that definitely sends a better message. But if
Just announce it and stay tuned.
that's it. And if you'd like me here for the 24th board meeting to take questions on it and kind of go over the similar things about which we just spoke, I'd be more than happy to
Here's
do
what
so.
I think it works well for us. So you come back on the 24th and we go through this again.
Okay.
And you just kind of recap what happened. Anybody has any questions, and then, we move on from there. That'd be the announcement.
Okay.
So, I came to you on this day, and you just recap.
Fine.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Then later have an investor meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that,
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
not that
Yeah.
same day.
I agree.
Absolutely.
We'll either bundle the investor meeting in
Yeah.
with October, or if we need to hold ones before then, because of timing, we can make that call too.
Yeah, as things start to progress with the disclosure and all the other seminal dates and benchmarks that need to be met, we'll keep everyone informed as to, okay, we're thinking maybe around this time is the best time to have that investor meeting and just start bouncing dates
Okay.
off each other.
Well, let's
You'll
do-
all be kept in the loop and you'll know exactly how things are progressing.
So we have a path forward.
Okay?
Excellent.
Yay, thank you.
That's
Thank you
Andy.
very much.
All right, very good.
Good to see you all.
Very good to see everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for the good news.
Absolutely, and thank you for the time to talk tonight.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
Michael, real quick, can we get this in electronic form?
Absolutely, you got it.
Thank you.
I'll send it forward tonight.
Great.
You got it. I'm sorry, I do not. I apologize. I came unprepared in that regard. It's been such a hectic
He
day.
sells these.
I will.
You could give him one of these.
There you go. All my information is in my email that I sent you. That's basically all it is. Is I work out of the house, so email and phone numbers all on there. Anything you need.
Okay.
Okay, so we have item 3, we have Switzerland Leadership Conference. This is a resolution for the Switzerland Leadership Conference in July 2020. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Explanation?
Yeah, so this was the student leadership conference that I attended at the end of my trip to Switzerland, and it was 2,000 kids that were brought together from 13 different countries, and they spend a weekend together. They're put in teams of 10, so 2,000 kids are put in teams of 10, and there's 200 kids, and every year there's a different theme, and it's a design thinking question. So this year's question was on communication and how can you harness the power of communication to make sure that all people are heard. And what these kids do is they come together, they put them in these random groups, so they're working with kids from all these different countries, and they come up with a prototype of around that design question. They have all weekend to work on it. There's a panel of celebrity judges. They judge each of the prototypes, and then the top 10 get picked, and they have to present to all 3,000 people that are at this conference. They have to give a 1-minute presentation on their prototype, and then those 10 are judged. And the winner, the group's prototype that wins, gets it's put in the exhibit at the Nobel Peace Prize Museum in Stockholm, Sweden for 1 year, and the kids get a monetary gift as well as a trip to New York City to visit. Just an awesome, awesome experience to see these kids come in and work together. So every year the design question is on a different theme. This upcoming year it's on sports and wellness. So we reached out to some of our staff that is involved with sports and wellness and asked if they would be interested in sponsoring a trip. So this is a resolution just to say that you approve of us trying to get together a group. It would be self-funded. The kids would pay for it themselves. It's no cost to the district. And then we would, couple of our staff members would join the kids and go on this trip and kind of oversee it. The thought is that each year, depending on the theme, we would ask different staff members to join, just depending on whatever the topic might be.
So I think Mrs. Schneider, she took them last year. Ethan got to go, did something locally where they had a question and they had to come up with it. They got monetary. It was local. It was great.
Yeah.
So to imagine being able to go to a different country
Yeah.
and interact, it's such a great experience. So yeah, it's wonderful. Okay.
That was quite incredible.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 4, executive session. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this motion is to enter into executive session for the consideration of the appointment, employment, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official per board policy 0166. Item A. Roll call.
Can I make a comment? In the middle of that page, it says recommended action, motion to approve the donation. Should be deleted.
Oh,
Yeah. Typo.
mistype or something.
That was copy and paste, that's what happened. Mr. Dolson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. We will now be in executive session.